Hello everyone, welcome to Landing CPT, OPT and H1B Jobs, a career guide for international students brought to you by ICAWay. I'm your host, Kwan Siegel. I have a very special guest joining me today, Martha Sidhu. Martha is a manager at KPMG in the audit practice. She also leads the Detroit office chapter of KPMG's API Business Resource Group. Martha and I connected through the Ascent Leadership Community, which is the largest global network dedicated to advancing Pan-Asian professionals in the workplace. Welcome, Martha. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be asked to be on the show.
Absolutely. It's so great to have you here with us. Let us dive right in because earlier this week, we talked about something so important, the idea of not thinking about cultural fit, but cultural add. Can you please share a little bit more about what that really means?
Yeah. And so I wish I could remember where I came across this concept, but it really struck me. But I think a lot of times, we think about joining a company or being in the workplace and thinking that we have to fit in with the existing culture that's already there. And so this idea about cultural fit versus cultural add was kind of about, kind of throwing out that idea that we have to fit in with the existing culture and thinking more about what can we bring to the culture that, might not be there, but maybe we have something different that we can add that is missing or that, would make for a good mix that would make it a good addition to the culture. So I really related to this idea because, I think I spent a lot of my early time in my new job just feeling really awkward about, feeling like I didn't fit in. Everybody was, it seemed like everybody else kind of had different things. It seemed like everybody played golf and everybody talked about football and there was I was a little bit different. I'm half Chinese and then my husband's from India, so we have kind of a lot going on and I guess there's a couple other factors too. Like I started in accounting as a second career, so most of my colleagues were also a lot younger than I am and I also had been in a nonprofit type of scenario before and then now I'm in a corporate environment. So there were just all these dimensions where I felt like I didn't really fit in and I kind of struggled with that because I felt like I needed to be this other person so that I would fit, so that I would have that cultural fit. But really, the more I kind of relaxed into just kind of being who I was, I realized I had things to add culturally that were different. And those things that made me different actually became assets to the company. So I started leading the business resource group for the Asian Pacific Islanders in my office and realize like the things that make me different, it's like those are the things that make me great at that. Like I'm planning events for Lunar New Year, I'm planning events for Diwali, and like who else in the world celebrates both of those things in their personal life? So like it kind of makes me, an expert on all these things outside of work that I can bring in and then kind of use that to share. Like I've planned lunch and learns where I'm, teaching the rest of the office or involving other people as well. Some of people share this background with me or, have also shared some of these holidays and then but a lot of the people that attend our lunch and learns really don't have that background and don't know much about any of these holidays. So like even like the learning the basics of them is new and it's something I can add, something I can bring in to add to the culture. So I really like this idea of thinking about cultural add instead of cultural fit.
I
Yeah.
love that. Especially our listeners, they are all international students from
Hmm.
diverse backgrounds.
Hmm.
And the first thing when they join corporate America, they will feel that they are so different. Like for my home country, we don't even call, when we say the word football, is actually soccer, right? So
Hmm.
we don't have that football understanding as part of our culture. So it's really going to be so hard for lots of students to try to integrate into the new culture. And The idea of instead of trying to be cultural fit but being cultural at is so amazing. You mentioned a little bit about, lunch and learn and then Chinese New Year. Can you share a few more example of like how you have seen this concept of cultural add in action? And also like how can an international student highlight their cultural contribution during the hiring process?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'm not an international student, but I think I could really relate to some of those struggles of, coming in and feeling like this is all very different and I don't quite feel like I fit in here. And, part of it for me was realizing that, I think I was sort of trying to fit in, and then I realized that, like, really I'm never going to be successful at being someone I'm not,
Mhm.
So I'm not a football fan. I'm never going to be able to have a great conversation about football because I just don't know. And, even if I tried to learn, I wouldn't know very much. It wouldn't be great. Like, I just need to be who I am. And I think once I kind of realized that what I was trying wasn't working, it kind of liberated me to just be like, you know what? I tried and tried to fit in and it didn't really work, and I'm tired of that. I'm going to stop trying. I'm going to just be who I am and do what I want. So they had all these business resource group things that we could, the company really encouraged us to get involved in. And so I thought, wait, great, I can do this in the middle of the workday. Like, sure, I'll sign up for all these things. So I just got really involved. And so based on that, like, I started helping to plan events and started contributing to the groups, met with other people who were also, working on putting these events together. And it was a great way to kind of take my interests and bring it together and meet other people with the same interests. And then, like, really, we kind of built a lot more that wasn't really happening before. We had these
Mhm.
BRGs, but they weren't as active. We didn't have as many events. And, it's been really great to be a part of that and kind of see how that, I mean, I think having some of these cultural events adds value to the office because, the people who don't know about these events, like, they actually do want to learn. They're interested. And and I think also another thing I would recommend listeners is, if you're looking for a company, if the places that you're looking at, if they value diversity, if they, really put
Mhm.
resources into their business resource groups and talk about how much they value diversity, like, that's kind of a value of the company. And so if that's part of the cultural conversation of the company, when you show up and you're like, hey, I know you guys are all talking about football and I don't know anything about that, but let me tell you about this other festival thing that I just went to this weekend. Maybe people are actually interested. They're like, oh, I don't know anything about that, and you have something to offer because you can teach me.
True.
And so I think that that's, a great way of getting involved. And incidentally, like, it's also like
Mhm.
getting involved in all these things has really helped me work wise in terms of being able to, like, build connections with people that I might not otherwise work with, get to know people at all different levels, across offices. And it's really helped me kind of get out there. Like, I think part of it was I was a little bit kind of afraid of not fitting in, so I didn't want to put myself out there too much. And then once I moved past that, I feel like I got a lot better at just being like, okay, well, I'm different from you, but this is who I am, and here's what I can bring, and I'll just tell you about the stuff that I did that maybe don't relate to at all, but it's something new. So the more that I could bring of that, the more it helped me kind of, I guess, get recognition in the office. People see me,
Mm.
planning events and putting things together, sending out the emails, and it's nice to kind of get some recognition for that work. And I think that recognition is something that we don't necessarily always think of. Like, I think a
Mhm.
lot of times people are in the mindset of, like, you need to get a job and, like, work really hard, put your head down, don't say anything, just work, 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 do a good job, and that's all you need to do to have success. But, the longer I've been in this position, the more I've kind of realized That's so not true. Like you have to do a good job, but that's the bare minimum. Like on top of that, you also have to be putting yourself out there, making sure people in the office, who are have some decision making power, like make sure they know who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
and for me, being involved in resource groups has given me a way to kind of get some visibility, have, something that I'm now known for. I'm known as being the BRG person. And so, yeah, it's helped me not just feel like I fit in, but it's also really helped me professionally.
So, so great. You know, lots of us, especially people from, the Asian cultures, we have been taught about working hard, right?
Hmm.
Instead of being visible. But
Right.
especially in corporate America, it is so, so, so important to be visible. But how can we be visible without trying too hard to fit in, but feel like we already belong here? So great. I love
Right.
all the advice that you share today.
Right. And I guess if I could, when you talk about belonging, that made me think of, so, partly because I have been so involved in these business resource groups, I was sponsored to get to go to the Ascend convention where I met you. And that's has been a fantastic experience. But so my first convention was last year, and the theme of the convention was I Belong. And I remember being really struck by that because
Mhm.
I'm half white, I'm half Chinese. I feel like I've spent my whole life feeling like I don't quite belong anywhere. And even at that convention, I felt like, maybe people look at me and they can't tell by looking at me that I'm Chinese. And so they might look at me and say, well, what is she doing here at this convention for Asian professionals if she doesn't look Asian? And, so the message that I got at that convention was I belong. Somebody came on stage and talked about how, there's a reason you got hired, or there's a reason you're in the room, there's a reason you're at the school you're at, or wherever place you are in life, there's a reason how you got there. And that reason is why you belong. You don't have to be just like everyone else who's works at the same company. You don't have to be like everyone else at your school. There's a reason that you got there, because
Yeah,
someone in the hiring process or admitting process decided, okay, this person looks like they're smart enough and they're capable of learning, and whatever, and that's why we want them here.
yeah,
And so for me, kind of remembering that and thinking, I don't have to be able to talk about football or golf or whatever else that everyone else might be talking about to belong. I belong because I'm already have been selected to be in the room in the first place for some reason. That's why I belong. And so I think that can be helpful, I think, for, if maybe some of, your viewers are international students and kind of might be coming in with this idea of like, oh, I'm different,
mhm.
might not belong. Like, maybe that keeping that in mind, I think might be helpful.
Absolutely. You have already been selected. First of all, you got selected to attend the universities here in the
Hmm.
US, right?
Yeah.
You already
Yeah.
belong here.
Yeah.
And then once you get your first job, yes, you have already been accepted. So accept yourself. And I think one thing that because during this conversation we mentioned a lot about API, you mentioned a lot about ERG and business resource group, employee resource group, ERG, BRG. Maybe one tips for international students during the hiring process is to Google. For example, if they
Yeah.
want to join or already have the interview with KPMG, you can Google KPMG, ERG, or BRG to see what
Mhm.
comes up and see
Yeah.
how you can, be part of those and
Yeah. And I think
highlight that during the hiring process.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, if you're interviewing with someplace, it's a great
Hmm.
question to ask, what kind of, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives does your company have? And just see what they say, because, if I think that can tell you a lot about, how much the company is talking about it, and if it's a priority, and and they may have information for you that might be useful as far as,
Absolutely.
what the options are.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I can say that, from like on the top of my mind right now, I think all the Fortune 500 companies, they have those resource group available, and it will also highlight your unique proposition as an international as well during the hiring process.
Yeah. And then I would also add,
Mhm.
if you do get hired, go join those groups because
Yes.
I mean, for me anyway, that's where I kind of felt like, oh, this is where I definitely do belong. So having that little corner of people who also,
Hmm.
I shared various traditions and heritage and, the people who could relate to me on all these things, it was really helpful. So I've heard people say this as like, find your people, so
Find your
I
people.
like to do that. Find your people who
Hmm.
can kind of understand where you're coming from and support you, and it gives you a chance to get involved in things. It gives you a chance to kind of show what you can do outside of, your day job, outside of just the technical stuff and
Right.
what you're expected day to day. It kind of shows what that extra thing is that you bring because you're different, because you've got that extra edge of something that you can bring.
Right.
That's your cultural add. So, yeah.
So amazing. Well, we are at the end of our podcast today, and I really enjoyed this conversation so much. Before we wrap up, can you leave our listeners with one final piece of advice when it comes to embracing their unique identities and making a meaningful contribution to their communities?
I mean, I guess, and this is not anything that no one already knows, but just kind of acknowledging who you are and that richness of, I think, coming from a different country, you've got a whole other set of, traditions and norms and history and like so much to draw on. Just remember that that's an asset and not a liability. Like that's something that you can hold on to that can help you gain an edge, honestly. So always keep in mind that it's a way to kind of get an additional leg up. Yeah,
So
just never let anyone convince you that it's a bad thing, that you've got extra assets to draw on.
thank you for this empowering advice, Martha. Those words of wisdom is so, so important. I wish that I could have, known you at the time that I started my
Oh.
first job in the US. Learn all about, this resource group and be part of the community that you are in. And for students who, let's say you are interviewing with KPMG or just recently joined KPMG, look for Martha.
Yes,
You
look me
can be
up. I
part
would
of her
love to
group.
connect with anyone. Yeah.
Good. Thank you again for these all amazing words of wisdom. And it's been a pleasure of having you on this show.
Sure, of course. My pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me to be on the podcast. It's definitely an honor. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We will pick one lucky reviewer, and if your name is picked, you will receive a free course packed with networking tips to help you tap into the hidden job market. And if you are looking to go beyond this free resource and you want a coaching program to help you land a CPT, OPT, and H1B job, please make sure to visit our website, icaway.com, and you will see the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I will see you next time. Think big and live your dream.